of the juicy nuggets in this are she grumbled about LeBron James and his, quote, outsized ego. She felt that Clutch had exerted too much control over the Lakers. She didn't see how LeBron was considered a savior of the franchise.
LeBron James.
She accused LeBron of having a lack of accountability over the Lakers trading for Russell Westbrook. She privately...
The Lakers owner completely lost it on LeBron James, live in front of everyone. In the words that came out of his mouth, "You destroyed everything we built." This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't some anonymous leak on a burner Twitter account to 2 a.m. This was a real moment, witnessed by real people inside that building. And as of right now, it has barely scratched the surface of mainstream media coverage. Nobody's talking about this the way they should be. And when you hear the full story, what led up to it, what was said in that room, what happened after, you're going to understand why the people who were there that night still don't want to go on record. This is the story the league doesn't want told, and we're telling it anyway.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm excited about today. I'm excited about the opportunity to be able to play the game that I love for another season. And, whatever the journey, however the journey, lays out this year, I'm just like super invested because like you just said, I don't know when the end is, but I know it's a lot sooner than later. So, being super appreciative of the fact that I could come up here, do another media day and talk to you guys and do all this stuff around here. So just excited.
To understand how things got this bad, you have to go back to the beginning of the 2025 season. Coming in, the energy around this team was different. Not bad different, just charged, like everyone could feel something was building, but nobody could quite put a name on it yet. LeBron James, heading deeper into the final chapters of what has genuinely been one of the greatest careers in basketball history, came into this season with one mission: prove the doubters wrong, again. And on the surface, everything looked fine. Press conferences were smooth, media appearances were polished, LeBron showed up to camp in shape, focused, saying all the right things. The front office put on their best smiles for the cameras. The owner, who has always preferred to operate from the shadows, away from the spotlight, stayed quiet publicly, the way he always does. But behind those closed doors, behind the practice facility walls, in the private meeting rooms that no camera ever enters, the tension had already started building. Sources close to the organization, people who were inside those rooms this past season, described the relationship between LeBron and the front office going into 2025 as professional but fragile, like two people who've been arguing for months but agreed to act normal at dinner. The owner had been quietly frustrated for a while, not just about wins and losses, though that was part of it, but something deeper, something that felt to him more personal. He felt like the franchise he had poured everything into was slowly being reshaped in someone else's image, and that someone wasn't him. That feeling didn't explode overnight. It simmered, quietly, patiently, until it couldn't anymore.
To play the rest of it, but his quote, "It's the way our team is constructed. We have to play close to perfect basketball to win." Okay. There are plenty of ways to dance. We all dance in any business that we're in, okay? Sometimes your boss asks you a certain question. Maybe you got to dance a little bit. Maybe, somebody asks you a question about your boss. Maybe you dance a little bit. Whatever the case is. It could be a relationship.
Here's where the story really starts to get complicated. Throughout the 2025 season, there were consistent reports, nothing confirmed publicly, but strong enough that people inside the league were talking, that LeBron had been pushing hard on roster decisions, not just as a player voicing an opinion, but as someone who expected his opinion to carry the weight of a final say. Now look, this isn't new territory for LeBron. His influence on front office operations has been discussed, debated, and dissected for years. Some people see it as a superstar using his leverage to build a winning environment. Others see it as a player overstepping his role. That debate has followed him his entire career. But this time, something was different. The owner, a man who built this franchise long before LeBron arrived, who has sat through the rebuilds and the disappointments and the championship highs, felt like he was no longer the one running his own team, and that feeling was eating at him. Multiple people within the organization described a specific stretch in early 2025 where the communication between LeBron's camp and the front office essentially broke down. Meetings that should have happened didn't. Decisions that should have been collaborative became one-sided. There was a sense, according to insiders, that the team was being operated based on what LeBron wanted rather than what the organization had planned. The losing didn't help either. When a team starts losing, really losing, not just a bad week, but a sustained, demoralizing stretch that has the fan base turning, the cracks that were already there get bigger, fast. And by the time February 2025 rolled around, the cracks in this organization weren't small anymore. They were fault lines. Here's what you need to know going into the next part of this story, because this is where it stops being background noise and starts being something none of us expected.
February 2025. The team had just come off one of their worst stretches of the season. The locker room, by most accounts, was not a happy place. Players were frustrated, coaches were walking on eggshells, and the pressure from ownership had been quietly building to a point where someone was going to break. What happened next, according to people who were either in the room or directly told about it shortly after, is the kind of thing that becomes locker room legend, the kind of story that gets passed around in whispers for years. A team meeting was called. Standard stuff, or at least it was supposed to be. Players, coaching staff, a few members of the front office. The kind of sit-down that happens when things need to be reset, when someone needs to look everyone in the eye and say, we need to do better. LeBron was there, coaches were there, the room was tense but contained. And then, the owner walked in. Unannounced, unscheduled, just walked in. The energy in the room shifted immediately. People who were there described it as the kind of silence that doesn't feel like quiet. It feels like pressure, like the air getting heavier all at once. He didn't sit down. He stood near the front of the room, and he started talking. At first, it was controlled, measured, the kind of speech you'd expect from an owner who's unhappy, pointed, firm, professional. He talked about expectations, he talked about the direction of the franchise, he talked about accountability. And then, something shifted, because at some point in that room, the conversation stopped being a speech and became a confrontation. What happened in that room in February 2025 has not been reported by ESPN. It hasn't been on The Athletic. It hasn't shown up in any of the mainstream NBA news cycles, at least not in the full, unfiltered version that the people who witnessed it actually describe. But here's what we know. At some point during that meeting, the owner looked directly at LeBron James and said, and these are the words that people who heard them have not been able to forget, "You destroyed everything we built." Let that land for a second. You destroyed everything we built. Not, we need to do better. Not, this isn't working for anyone. Not the kind of diplomatic franchise speak that gets issued in press releases and ESPN crawlers. 5 words directed at one man in front of an entire room. Now, what exactly did the owner mean by everything we built? Because that phrase matters. That phrase carries years of history in it. People close to the organization interpret it differently, depending on who you ask. Some say he was talking about the culture, a specific identity the franchise had spent years developing before LeBron reshaped the roster and the locker room dynamic around himself. Others say it was about specific personnel decisions, players who were moved, relationships that were severed, draft capital that was spent, all in service of building around a star who, in the owner's mind, had taken more than he'd given back. And some, the ones who know this owner best, say it was even more personal than that it was about respect, about the feeling that the man who owns this franchise had been made to feel like a guest in his own building.
Whatever the full meaning, the effect in that room was immediate. LeBron, by multiple accounts, went still. Not explosive, not defensive, still. The kind of stillness that people who know him say is actually more concerning than anger, because it means something registered, something hit. The rest of the room barely breathed. One staff member who was present described the moment as the most uncomfortable thing I've ever sat through in my entire time in this league. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, and then the meeting ended, not cleanly, not with resolution. It just stopped. People filed out. Conversations that normally happen after team meetings, the side chatter, the jokes, the decompression, didn't happen that night. People went home, and according to multiple sources, several members of that staff didn't sleep. If you think the story ends there, it doesn't. What came next might actually be worse. In the days after that meeting, the public version of the Lakers looked completely normal. LeBron showed up to practice, he played games, he gave press conference answers that were professional and largely unremarkable. He posted on social media. The machine kept moving, the way it always does, because that's what these organizations are built to do. Keep the machine moving. Don't let the outside world see the gears grinding. But internally, the organization was in damage control mode. Front office staff were reportedly told, informally but clearly, not to discuss what happened in that room. Coaches were navigating a locker room that had just watched their franchise player get publicly confronted by the man who signs the checks. And LeBron himself, sources describe him as locked in but distant in the weeks following. Still performing, still competing, but something had shifted in how he carried himself around the building. The casualness that usually defines his presence, the ease, the jokes, the big personality that fills a locker room, was noticeably quieter. And then, the rumors started. Not loud ones, not the kind that end up as breaking news chyrons on sports networks, but the quiet, persistent kind that travel through agents and front offices and back channels, the kind that people in the league take more seriously than anything that gets published. The word being whispered was exit, as in LeBron was thinking about his future, as in the relationship between him and this organization had been damaged in a way that might not be repairable, as in the events of that February meeting had accelerated a conversation that was probably going to happen eventually anyway, but was now happening faster than anyone expected. Fan reaction, once fragments of this started leaking out on social media in the spring of 2025, was split right down the middle, and the split was ugly. One side of the fan base came out swinging for LeBron. Comments flooded posts, saying the owner had no right to speak to a player like that LeBron had given this franchise more than it deserved, that without him they'd have nothing worth talking about. The other side? They agreed with every word the owner said. They'd been saying for years that LeBron's influence over organizational decisions had gone too far, that the franchise had sacrificed long-term vision for short-term star chasing, that the culture, the real culture, the one that existed before LeBron turned it into a personal project, had been hollowed out, and for once, someone with actual power had said it out loud. The debate online was vicious, the kind of discourse that doesn't produce answers, just more noise, more heat, more division, which, honestly, might be the most fitting metaphor for everything this situation represents.
Here's the part of the story that nobody wants to say plainly, so we're going to say it. What happened in that room in February 2025 wasn't just about a bad stretch of games, or a personality conflict, or even a disagreement over roster moves. It was about power, and what happens when two people, both of whom believe they are the most important person in a building, finally run out of room to coexist. LeBron James has spent the last decade operating as something that no player before him really was, a full ecosystem. Not just a player, not just a brand, a decision maker, a culture setter, a man who, when he walks into an organization, doesn't just join it, he transforms it. Whether you love that or hate it depends entirely on which side of the outcome you ended up on. And the owner of this franchise, he built something, invested something, gave years and money and identity to a team that he genuinely believed in. And somewhere along the way, he started to feel like a passenger in a vehicle he owned. That feeling, that specific, particular, deeply personal feeling, is what came out of his mouth in that meeting. "You destroyed everything we built." Not a business statement, a wound. And wounds like that don't close quickly, if they close at all. The question the league is quietly asking right now, the question that agents and executives and coaches are sitting with as 2025 moves forward, is whether LeBron James in this franchise can actually come back from this moment. Whether the relationship, already strained before that meeting, has enough left in it to survive what was said in that room. Or whether February 2025 will be remembered as the beginning of the end of LeBron's time in Los Angeles, the end of an era that delivered moments nobody will ever forget, but also, apparently, damage that ran deeper than any of us who are allowed to see. Because here's what keeps coming back, no matter how you feel about either side of this story. Those words weren't said by someone who had given up yet. You don't say "you destroyed everything we built" to someone you're still fighting for or fighting with, which means this isn't over, not even close. So here's where we land. An owner who felt invisible in his own building, a superstar who operates on a frequency most franchises aren't built to handle, a confrontation that happened in front of an entire room, produced one sentence that nobody in that room will ever forget, and somehow, still hasn't fully broken into the mainstream conversation the way it deserves. So whether you think the owner was right, whether you think LeBron has been treated unfairly, whether you think this is the end or just another chapter, one thing is undeniable. Something broke in that room in February 2025, and the ripples are still moving. So let me ask you this, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Was the owner right to say what he said, or did he cross a line that no executive should ever cross with a player of LeBron's caliber? Drop it in the comments, because this conversation is just getting started.